Hello friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Anurekha Charivag, Assistant Professor at the Department of Sociology, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. Today we are going to discuss the module titled Labour Migration, Trends and Implications Part 2. This module is part of the paper titled Agrarian Social Structure and Change. This paper is coordinated by Dr. Manish Thakur of IIM Kolkata. In this module titled Labour Migration, Trends and Implications, we are going to focus on general consequences of migration with regard to rural India. Further, we will also look into how the whole process of migration impacts rural poor. Further, we will also look into the experiences of migration of rural women when they have to migrate either for marriage purpose or they have to migrate for work purpose. Further, in this module, we will focus on the trends in the study of labour migration in India. This module is in continuation of the module 4.4a, in which we learnt about some of the general features of migration. In the same module, we learnt about different types of migration and paid particular attention to seasonal migration, besides delineating some of the general causes associated with migration of labour in our times. We surveyed a wide range of literature to cover some of the important aspects of migration of labour. To build on our earlier discussion and to extend it complete to further our understanding of migration, this module discusses the consequences of migration in general and for the rural poor in particular. It also describes the experiences of migration of rural women in India and the conditions in terms of work and employment. Towards the end, we underline some of the possible trends in the study of labour migration. We devote this much time and an intellectual resource to the issue of migration as it has acquired added momentum in our country in the last few decades or so. Moreover, we are convinced that migration is a significant process affecting the agrarian relations and social structure in contemporary times. Villages are no longer to be seen as stable communities at birth. In fact, they were never so. However, as an increasing number of people circulate across vast geographic distances, they are likely to be carriers of new ideas, values and ideals of life. The migrants are likely to acquire and develop socio-economic, cultural wherewithal to escape many of the handicaps of the community in places of origin. They can exercise new livelihood choices and thereby move from lower paying sectors and places to relatively higher paying ones. They need not remain settled in older economic grooves of the patron-client relations in the village or carry on the burden of indebtedness through working for the same employer across generations. Migration opens up possibilities of upward mobility as well. True, it also disrupts some of the older certitudes of life in a sheltered and protective social environment, even if that life remains characterized with abysmally low level of economic resources. Consequences of rural labour migration. In India, almost 60% of the labour force maintains a livelihood from agriculture. At the same time, it is also true that women are generally excluded from the right to property, including ownership of agricultural land in many parts of the country. Interestingly, gender disparity in land holding apart, the proportion of women as agricultural labourers has been increased over the last 40 years in comparison with men. The rising share of women in agricultural wage employment has been called feminization of agricultural labour. Scholars have argued that increasing feminization of agricultural labour is an important consequence of rural to urban migration. Given the predominantly male character of migration, the vacancy created by the absent men in the village gets filled by women. While men work in the urban areas, thereby create a vacuum in agricultural wage employment sector in the countryside, women come forward to take up agricultural jobs in addition to other household activities. This phenomenon is more apparent in dry regions where a substantial number of small farmers and casual labourers undertake seasonal migration. Garipati's empirical study of Andhra Pradesh observes that 67.7% of agricultural labourers are women. Moreover, these women spend 88.3% of the non-domestic work time in the fields. The male members of their families migrate for off-farm employment and their income constitutes 33.4% of the household income on an average. Migrant earnings are spent in different ways. It compensates for the vagaries for agricultural production. Rural poor pay back the loans from these earnings. Some people invest part of their income in buying agricultural equipment, irrigation pumps and jewelry. It also takes care of expenses incurred on life cycle rituals and festivals and thereby helps them gain a social position in the society. Indeed, some migrants do succeed in creating productive assets like land and house before returning home. Others, as mentioned earlier, channel the income in repaying the debt. Be that as it may, scholarly findings indicate that in many cases migration do not improve the quality of life of the rural people. Rather, it undermines it in the several cases. But then for rural poor, migration has turned out to be a time-tested strategy of survival. In a way, migration raises male position in the household as the family becomes more dependent on their earnings. The voice of the woman thins down even as the work increases. Men who migrate for work spend their time in leisure and recreation after returning home. Women who migrate with their husbands have to continue managing their domestic and reproductive roles together with their wage earning. Seen thus, migration usually increases workload of women. Some of the migrant laborers become local labor contractors. After spending a couple of years in urban areas, they develop a network with employers and other contractors or the big agents. This helps them to increase their earning capacity. Such successful migrant families leave their village, homestead, begin to reside permanently in urban areas. As a result of migration, rural people are also introduced to new types of consumption opportunities. Some of them stay mostly in urban areas and only for a few months, especially during the time of harvesting, they return to their village. This has implications for family structures in the villages. In villages, large extended families begin to split into smaller nuclear families because of the income differentials between migrant and non-migrant members of the family. In some cases, workers go to town early in the morning and return home late at night, so they have less time to spend with their relatives. In a way, migration brings about change in the nature and character of existing family and social relationships. The migrant laborers move from one place to another and stay in different places with people from various castes and ethnicities. Rogali et al. Argue that such an interaction has led to the change in the social identities. They are also of the opinion that employers' interaction with the workers to affect the later social identities. Many migrant workers have improved their personal and family's economic condition. They have also showed a tendency to learn the local language, cultural practices, dress pattern, or even religious practices in order to feel comfortable and make themselves acceptable in the local society. Such transformations are outcomes of socio-economic exposure and economic well-being. Migration of rural women in India, conditions and consequences. In the last half of a century, women are migrating more than ever. Earlier, migration was largely a saga of male migrants. Even when the latter was accompanied by women, women always appeared in the larger narrative as dependent. It was only recently that scholars have started looking at migration as a process empowering women. From women's point of view, as some scholars underline, migration could be a liberating experience despite the heavy burden placed on women as perpetual negotiators between two cultures, migrant and the host. Much of the credit for the centrality of women in the contemporary research on migration must go to the feminist scholarship. In fact, the 1970s saw the study of labor migration from gender perspective. Scholars have gradually realized that the process, consequences and factors of migration have gender-related consequences. Scholars argue that migration of rural women is impeded by two reasons. First, women are responsible for all domestic work where they have to do all the chores in the houses. When the male members migrate to distant places for work, they leave their farm, livestock and children in the care of the women. Second, most of the migrant laborers stay in open areas where there are little or no sanitation facilities. Therefore, it would be an awful situation for the women migrants. In many cases, women migrants are physically harassed by the employers or the contractors. Therefore, it is clear that the high level of male migration reduces the chances of female migration due to the latter's heightened household responsibility and the rise of local employment opportunities. Women migration is impeded by women's vulnerability and the need for their protection. Sometimes our contractors favor to take both husbands and wives into service. If husbands fail to complete the work due to sickness or some other reasons, a wife could take place of their husbands. Gari Pati has noted that some of the laborers who migrate with their wives earn more than the laborers who move alone. Apart from this, the number of women migrant workers has been increased today because of globalization. In India, a substantial number of young women have migrated to cities in search of work and attaining for a better life for themselves and their families. They are mostly involved in service, manufacturing and informal sector. Sundari is of the opinion that in all the countries, migrant laborers are mostly men except India, where number of women migrant is higher than the male counterpart. In large cities, male migrant workers are large in number, whereas women migrate short distance within the rural areas. In India, rural to urban migration of women is more pronounced than that of urban to urban migration. Lack of employment opportunity in the rural areas is a primary push factor of migration for rural women. The rural women are traditionally engaged in agriculture, but the labor intake capacity of agricultural sectors has been reduced drastically due to economic reforms, structuration, natural disasters, and poor infrastructure for irrigation. Roberts has pointed out that export industries have a continued demand of gender-specific labor. The growth of export industries in some parts of the country ensure the out-migration of rural women. Drought is an important cause of women migration, and has been observed that in the drought-prone regions of Tamil Nadu, that when intensity of drought is increased, women agricultural laborers begin to migrate in industrial towns and cities in search of work. Social capital as well as social network has a significant impact on women migration. Social network provide job information, temporary shelters to the newcomers, and a sense of security among the rural women who for the first time begin to adjust with the urban environment. Lisa Eklund is of the opinion that women workers are more dependent on the social networks in faraway places in comparison to men. Such social capital works as pull factors for their migration and assure them a sense of security in unfamiliar surroundings. In many cases, employers refuse to take migrant workers without reference of some known people. It is equally true that the decision to migrate is mostly taken by both male and female members of the families. It is the man who first moves to the workplace and then he asks his family members to accompany him. In case of widow or divorced women, the migration decision solely depends on them, or sometimes their relatives assist them to take decision. Sundari's empirical investigation in Tamil Nadu led her to conclude that a large section of women migrants belong to the age group of 21 to 30. The majority of women migrant laborers are from Hindu backward caste, where scheduled caste and scheduled tribe women comprise around one-third of the labor force. More than half of the migrant women are married and they stay with their husbands after migration. A considerable proportion of women migrants lack school education. Those unskilled labor forces crowd in the urban market and engage in low-paid jobs under dreadful conditions. Mose et al. In their work have observed that women migration is high among the Bhil community. In the survey, they found 42% of migrant laborers were women. In India, a large number of women migrants are employed in the construction sector. They migrate with their husbands and children. As they are mostly uneducated and low skilled, they are recruited as manual laborers for work such as digging and carrying construction materials. Their wages are comparatively lower than that of the male workers in spite of India's Equal Remuneration Act. Besides the job security, living arrangements and earnings are quite appalling. They have no regular working hours, they have to work every day under severely stressful conditions, and of course there is always a risk of termination. The women workers are not provided maternity or sick leave. Scholars have observed that some women migrant workers to carry weighty bricks in the late stage of pregnancy. Their children often go along with them and also suffer from health problems because of inhaling dust, smoke and other perilous components at the work sites. Sometimes they have to pay a percentage of the income to the agent through whom they get the jobs. They are not well aware of the labor laws and the government rules and regulations. They hesitate to discuss the working conditions to the outsiders as they think that it will increase their job insecurity. It is because they perceive that there is no way of reducing their harassment. They have no unions for potential directions. Scholars are also of the opinion that although women become independent earners in the wake of migration, there is no improvement in the household decision-making power when compared to the pre-migration conditions because it is difficult to estimate the earning of the migrant woman. In case of a couple, the contract wages are not negotiated separately for a husband and wife. The couple are given a fixed amount of money as wages. Sometimes the wives of the migrant workers, laborers work as maid servants in the house of the employers. They hand over their incomes to their husbands. Some scholars argue that as rural laborers are exposed to the urban environment through migration, it gradually transforms the traditional life and joint family into modern urban life with nuclear family. It also brings sufficient autonomy to women. Bhattacharya and Korinek, in their empirical investigation among the women migrant laborers in Delhi, have observed that majority of them, around 75%, want to stay in their jobs in spite of hazardous working and living conditions. They perceive that in urban areas they would get a stable source of income which they could not be provided with in their villages. They also feel that the economic position has ameliorated after migration. This amelioration assumes added significance when viewed against the backdrop of gender divide in places of origin. A recent report by P. Sainath, the well-known journalist and commentator on rural affairs, describes a strong gender divide characterizing agricultural tasks in the countryside. Women are barred from ploughing, but they are most exclusively perform operations like transplanting, weeding, harvesting, threshing, and also do post-harvest work. According to one analysis, women form 32% of the workforce that provides the land for cultivation, 76% of those sowing seeds, 90% of people engaged in transplantation, 82% of those transporting the crop from the field to home, 100% of workers processing food, and 69% of those in dairying. Most of these activities mean a lot of bending and squatting. Besides, many of the tools and implements used were not designed for the comfort of women. The work women do in the field seems them move forward constantly while bending and squatting, so severe pain in the back and the legs is very common. Often standing skin deep in water during transplantation, they are also exposed to skin diseases. Then there is injury from implements made for women and never refashioned for women. Injuries from sickles and mashers are common and decent medical care is rare. Thus, tetanus is a constant threat. Karl Polanyi, in his famous book The Great Transformation, argues that land, labor, money are fictitious commodities. Commodities are those which are produced for sale in the market. But land is a gift of nature and the labor is a work of human beings. So land and labor cannot be artificially produced. The earnings of rural migrant laborers entirely depend on the laborers. Following Marx, it can be argued that when society moves from feudalism to capitalism, two types of transformation occurs. It transforms the social means of subsistence into capital. Hence, it converts a peasant class into the labor class. It also separates peasants or workers from their means of production. In this module, we have seen how rural poor peasants migrate other areas and work as laborers. In their case, alienation also occurs because they have little control over what they do. They have no authority to decide what to do and how to do. Marx too propounds that capitalism creates a reserve army of laborers to maintain a constant supply of cheap workers. But in reality, it is observed that such a reserve army of labor does not take shape as seamlessly as Marx would have us believe. One important reason is low level of education. At present, knowledge-based economy is growing rapidly. Bob Jessop is of the opinion that knowledge is the newest factor of production and it provides an edge to modern capitalist system. In this system, workers are remunerated in exchange of their intangible output, but the rural laborers do not get access to education, so they have to rest content with jobs in the informal sector. Therefore, the peasants or the migrant laborers cannot easily transform themselves into skilled wage laborers because of lack of knowledge. Somehow, most of the scholars fail to appreciate the intrinsic value of labor migrations as a dynamic aspect of rural livelihoods. Moreover, they reveal that economist viewpoint alone. Scholars need to focus on migrant laborers maintain the social networks both in the new places of work and back in their villages. For example, in many places, participating in village festivals is mandatory. The migrant workers often revert to the village for the celebration of certain festivals. If someone does not show his or her presence during festivals, she or he will be ostracized from the community and may be looked down upon. In this way, through festivals and periodic visits, migrant workers maintain their social networks in the villages as well. Mose et al. Takes a note of this aspect of rural labor migration in their work. Yet, we need an in-depth understanding of migrants' urge to keep the social bonds active in those settings. Some of the migrant laborers become successful entrepreneurs in towns and cities. Future research can focus on emergent entrepreneurship among migrants. As of now, much of the research on migration either document or depict the awful condition of poor migrant laborers or explore multiple conditions for migration. Some policies, namely Manrega, ostensibly geared towards reducing migration. The fact of the matter is that in India, most of the job opportunities are now in the informal sectors. Given this trajectory of growth, drivers of the economy will increasingly rely on the dependable supply of labor in the informal sector. It would be worthwhile on the part of the scholars to focus their attention on the ways and means through which migrant laborers can enhance their quality of life given the overall macroeconomic constraints. There is a need to identify such politics that will aid the migrants' quest for a relatively secure and dignified livelihood. We need policies and regulatory frameworks that will contain and mitigate their exploitation. After independence, Government of India took several initiatives to provide institutional sources of cheap credit so that villages do not fall prey to the usurious loans. Yet a large number of migrant workers still depend on usury. We need to think about productivity gains not only from the point of view of the GDP but also the point of view of the perspective of the migrant laborers. We await further research on the role of NGOs, political parties, civil societies to create awareness and thereby help to secure legal protection for migrant workers. In this context, Rogali argued that in West Bengal, Krishak Sabha CPIM organization comprising of small cultivators and wage workers has played an important role in improving the working conditions of the migrant laborers. Krishak Sabha allows migrant laborers to work during the peak seasons. The wages are also fixed and are also made equal to that of the non-migrant laborers. It also reduces the gap between the male and the female wages. In fact, it is surprising that migrant laborers are often at the mercy of employers and contractors despite the presence of vast cadre of government labor officers. Fieldwork-based research reveals gross violation of human rights of migrant laborers, the under-recording and under-reporting of their exploitation. They evoke too much pity even on the part of the scholars, as migrants' dreadful working and living conditions are seen of a piece with the poverty-stricken and hunger-stricken environment that they come from. It is time we granted migrants their agency. We should not paint them as all victims of the insurmountable structures. They do not always react to their existential conditions with such passivity as often the literature recounts. They may elect or opt for certain livelihood options in accordance with the socio-economic conditions and their own assessment of their income earning abilities and the judgment of the surrounding environment. Be that as it may, it is also true that the migrant workers are the first victims of ethnic politics and regional chauvinism in some political parties indulge in. In Mumbai, it is generally the poor migrant worker from the Hindi-speaking region of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh who get targeted as and when the Shiv Sena and the splinter group, the Maharashtra Navnirman Sena, to give a call for the open display of the nativism and parochialism. In different places in Assam, poor Bihari workers get beaten up, killed in the name of insider versus outsider. Example abound when communal riots, ethnic clashes and civic disorders of multiple sorts make life extra difficult for poor migrant workers in different parts of the country. They are often looked at as the scum of the urban landscape whose aesthetics and civility gets compromised by the sheer presence of the underfed and ill-clothed migrants. In any case, rural migrants are going to be the persistent presence in our midst. It would be limiting if we look at them only in relation to urban industrial complex. Indeed, they have a constitutive presence vis-a-vis the rural as well. Scholars need to factor in fundamental changes emanating out of the all-pervasive rural labor migration, even for an understanding of the rural and the village. Students, in conclusion to this module titled Labor Migration Trends, we could see that there is very close linkages between migration and livelihood, especially in the context of sustainable livelihood. We have also seen how the whole process of migration has led to alienation of migrant labor. Further, from the discussions in the module, we will also have referred to the specific challenges for women migrant labor, especially in terms of their working conditions and laboring conditions. And finally, we have also focused on how the migrants relate to the regional politics, especially in terms of the Sons of the Soil movement, as to who can work where and who is the citizen of which space. Thank you.